In an essay, corrupt bully brutally slapped a 78-year-old widow, knocking her to the floor in a packed diner. The entire room just watched, frozen in fear, too afraid to say a single word. The bully laughed, thinking he was an untouchable king in his small town. He believed his power was absolute. But he made one fatal mistake. He had no idea her son was a Navy SEAL, and that he and his K-9 partner were about to walk right through that door. Imagine a quiet hero flipping the script on a whole corrupt town. Stay tuned. This tale of payback will have you on the edge of your seat. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe to Black Notebook for more. What hidden dangers lurk in a peaceful mountain town? You won't believe how one slap unravels it all. Part 1. The air in Aspen Ridge, Colorado, carried the crisp, clean promise of approaching winter. It was early October, and the mountains that cradled the town were a breathtaking tapestry of gold, crimson, and deep evergreen. A light frost had silvered the edges of the pine needles overnight, and now, as the morning sun climbed over the peaks, it melted into glistening droplets that caught the light like tiny diamonds. The scent of pine and damp earth was a constant welcome companion. This was the peace Era Wilson had been searching for. Era, a woman in her late 70s with soft white hair pinned neatly in a bun and eyes the color of a gentle sky, pulled her knitted shawl tighter around her shoulders. She was a widow, a woman who had navigated the storms of a long life with a quiet grace that was often mistaken for weakness. But beneath the surface, there was a core of resilient steel, forged in love, loss, and the steadfast raising of a remarkable son. That son, Owen, had recently purchased a beautiful secluded house on the edge of Lake Serenity, just outside of town, insisting she deserved a sanctuary away from the noise of the city. This extended vacation was his gift, a place for her to breathe. She pushed open the glass door of the mountaintop diner, a bell tinkling cheerfully to announce her arrival. The diner was the heart of Aspen Ridge, a cozy haven of worn wooden booths, red vinyl stools, and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, sizzling bacon, and maple syrup. It was exactly the kind of place Era loved, simple and warm. Behind the counter, a young woman named Chloe Vance moved with an efficiency that belied her age. Chloe, barely in her early 20s, had a sharp, observant gaze and a mane of dark curly hair tied back in a messy ponytail. She had grown up in Aspen Ridge and understood its rhythms, both the gentle currents and the dangerous undertones. She offered a quick, genuine smile. "Morning, ma'am. Just yourself today?" "Just me," Era confirmed, her voice soft but clear. "A booth by the window if it's not too much trouble." "Not at all." As Era settled into the booth, her gaze drifted to the scene outside. A young man, probably a tourist, was setting up a camera on a tripod across the street. This was Liam Webb, a travel vlogger with a modest but growing following, known for his Authentic America series. He was a bundle of optimistic energy with a bright smile and a trendy beanie pulled over his blonde hair. He adjusted his lens, hoping to capture the idyllic charm of the diner, the perfect establishing shot for his video on the hidden gems of Colorado. Mall Village. A cat named Whiskers discovered a magic fish in a pond. The fish promised 3 wishes in exchange for its freedom. Whiskers wished for endless fish, a cozy bed, and a bell that rang softly. The fish granted all 3 wishes and swam away, leaving Whiskers content and purring in the sun. Era's peaceful moment was shattered by a booming voice that seemed to suck the warmth from the room. Well, look what we have here. More city money gracing us with its presence." The voice belonged to Cade Jennings. He was a large, imposing man in his 50s, a local contractor whose bulk was built more from beer and grievances than hard labor. His face was perpetually flushed, and his small, calculating eyes scanned the diner as if he owned it. He wore a dusty work coat and a sneer that seemed permanently etched onto his lips. He was sitting in a corner booth with 2 other men, their quiet followers, who chuckled on cue. Era chose to ignore him, turning her attention to the menu. But Cade wasn't a man to be ignored. He heaved himself out of his booth, his heavy boots thudding on the linoleum floor as he made his way over to her. The low hum of conversation in the diner faltered and died. Everyone knew Cade. Everyone knew to stay out of his way. He stopped beside her table, casting a large shadow over her. "Don't see many of your kind in here," he said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. "Usually stick to those fancy bistros up on the peak." Era looked up at him, her expression calm. "I find the coffee here is much better," she replied politely. Behind the counter, Chloe's smile had vanished. Her jaw was tight. She knew exactly what this was. Cade Jennings was the blunt tool for Sterling Croft, the developer trying to buy up the entire lakeshore. Cade's specialty was convincing reluctant sellers. Chloe slowly reached under the counter, her fingers finding her phone. She propped it up discreetly between a napkin dispenser and a stack of menus, making sure the camera had a clear view of the booth, and pressed record. This wasn't the first time she'd seen him bully someone, but this time felt different, more vicious. Could a single coffee spill ignite a firestorm of corruption? Hold on tight, the real fight is just heating up. Cade's sneer widened. Is that right? Well, enjoy it while you can. Some of us are trying to preserve what makes this town special, not turn it into some playground for rich folks who don't belong, I assure you. I have no intention of changing your town, Era said, her voice remaining steady, though she could feel a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. She thought of her late husband, a man of immense kindness and quiet strength. He would have known how to handle a man like this, not with aggression, but with a firm, unshakable dignity that would make a bully feel small. She channeled that memory, that strength. Oh, I think you do, Cade shot back, his voice rising, drawing the attention of everyone in the diner, including Liam outside, who now zoomed his camera in. Intrigued by the unfolding drama, I hear you're the one holding up progress over at the lake. Got a real nice offer for that property your son bought, but you're just too stubborn to see sense, so that was it. This wasn't a random act of hostility. It was targeted. It was about the house. Owen had warned her that the developer was aggressive, but she hadn't expected this. The house is not for sale, Era stated, her tone final. My son bought it for our family. Cade leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. Your family? You mean the son who's never here? The one who drops in a pile of cash on a house and leaves his old mother here to be a thorn in the side of hardworking local folks. He rested his thick, grease-stained knuckles on her table. This is a small town, lady. We have our own way of doing things. We don't appreciate outsiders coming in, buying up prime real estate, and refusing to play ball. It messes with the natural order of things. Era could feel the eyes of the other patrons on her. She saw fear in some, annoyance in others, but no one moved to intervene. They were trapped in the web of small-town politics, afraid of a man who held sway through intimidation and connections. She felt a profound sense of isolation, a feeling she hadn't known since the first few weeks after her husband passed. But she would not be cowed. There is nothing natural about trying to bully a woman into selling her home, she said, her voice quiet, but ringing with authority. Now, if you'll excuse me, I would like to enjoy my breakfast in peace. The defiance in her voice seemed to snap something in Cade. His face turned a shade darker, a deep blotchy red. The pretense of conversation was over. This was raw intimidation now, and he was enjoying his audience. Cade Jennings's face was a mask of pure rage. The quiet, unyielding dignity of the woman before him was an insult he couldn't tolerate. In his world, power was loud, boorish, and physical. Her calm was a language he didn't understand, and it infuriated him. Era knew she could not win a battle of wills with such a man. There was no reasoning with him. Her only option was to remove herself from the situation. With a grace that defied the tension in the air, she stood, placing a few crisp dollar bills on the table to cover the coffee she would never drink. I wish you a better day, sir, she said, her voice a soft murmur, and turned to leave. That was the final spark. Her refusal to engage, her calm dismissal of him as nothing more than an unpleasant interruption, sent Cade over the edge. He moved with surprising speed for a man of his size, stepping in front of her to block her path to the door. You think you're better than me? He roared, his voice echoing in the dead, silent diner. Spittle flew from his lips. You waltz in here, look down your nose at us, and then just walk away. Before Era could react, he swept his thick arm across the small table. The heavy ceramic mug, half full of hot coffee, went flying. Era gasped and flinched back as hot liquid splashed across the floor and the wall, a few scalding drops hitting the back of her hand. The sound of the mug shattering against the linoleum was like a gunshot. The shock of the act, the sudden violence of it, made her stumble. For a moment, she was disoriented, her heart pounding in her chest. It was in that moment of vulnerability that Cade committed his gamble. He saw her fear, and it fed the ugly fire inside him. He drew back his hand, the thick gold ring on his finger glinting under the fluorescent lights, and swung. The sound of the slap was sharp, ugly, and final. It cut through the silence, a sound that would be seared into the memory of everyone present. Era cried out, a small, sharp sound of pain and shock. The force of the blow wasn't overwhelming, but the surprise and imbalance sent her staggering backward. Her heel caught on the leg of a chair, and she fell, crumpling onto the cold, hard floor. A collective gasp went through the diner. Patrons froze, forks halfway to their mouths. Across the street, Liam Webb's jaw dropped. His camera, still rolling, had captured the entire horrific sequence in perfect high-definition clarity behind the counter. Chloe Vance felt a surge of cold fury, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the counter. Her own phone still faithfully recording the crime dot, and then the bell above the door tinkled. The man who entered was the physical opposite of Cade Jennings. He was in his late 30s, dressed in a simple dark green flannel shirt, worn jeans, and sturdy hiking boots. The clothes were ordinary, but they couldn't conceal the coiled power in his frame. The broad shoulders, the lean, muscular build of a man whose body was a finely tuned weapon. He moved with an unnerving economy of motion, a predatory grace. His eyes, a deep piercing blue that held none of his mother's gentleness, swept the room and took in the scene in a fraction of a second. He saw his mother on the floor. He saw the shattered mug, and he saw Cade Jennings standing over her, chest puffed out like a conqueror. This was Owen Wilson. At his side, on a simple leather leash, sat Shadow. The German Shepherd was a magnificent animal, 100 pounds of sleek black and tan muscle. His ears were erect, his dark, intelligent eyes fixed on Cade. He didn't bark or lunge. He sat perfectly still, radiating a calm, controlled energy that was somehow more terrifying than any overt aggression. Owen's gaze locked onto his mother. His expression didn't change, but a switch had been flipped. The calm vacationer was gone. The Navy SEAL was in control. He issued a single low command. Watch. The word was barely a whisper, but Shadow responded instantly. He moved from a sitting position to a low crouch, a deep guttural growl rumbling in his chest. It was not the sound of an angry pet. It was the professional warning of a trained military asset. He didn't attack. He flowed forward, placing his body directly between Cade and the fallen Era, his eyes never leaving the bully. The message was unmistakable. You will not take one more step toward her. Cade Jennings, who had faced down angry husbands and rival contractors, froze. His bravado, so potent just a moment ago, evaporated in the face of the silent lethal promise radiating from the dog. He took an involuntary step back. Owen ignored him completely. He walked forward, his step silent and measured, and knelt beside his mother. "Mom, are you okay?" His voice was gentle, the harsh edge gone, reserved only for her. "Owen," she whispered, her hand going to her reddening cheek. "I'm all right, dear." Just startled, he helped her to her feet with an easy strength, his eyes scanning her for any injury. He saw the red mark on her cheek, the splash of coffee on her hand, and something cold and hard settled in his gaze. Once he was sure she was steady, he turned his full, undivided attention to Cade Jennings. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The low, flat tone he used carried more menace than any shout ever could. "You just made a serious mistake." From a booth in the back of the diner, another man watched the scene unfold. Sheriff Brody Kent, a man in his late 50s with a face weathered by sun and cynicism, slowly lowered his coffee cup. He wore his uniform with a lazy, comfortable authority, the silver star on his chest polish, but his demeanor suggesting he hadn't had to do any real police work in years. He'd been watching Cade's performance with a look of bored amusement. Cade was a useful tool, and the old woman had been a nuisance, but this was new. The arrival of this quiet, dangerous-looking man and his military-grade dog was an unplanned complication. The sheriff sighed. It seemed he would have to get involved after all. Not to arrest Cade, of course not, but to manage the situation. To contain the fallout, he slowly pushed himself out of his booth, adjusting the gun belt on his hips, and began to walk toward the center of the diner, his face a mask of practiced official concern. Sheriff Brody Kent ambled forward, his posture a study in practiced nonchalance. He approached the tense standoff, not with urgency, but with the weary air of a man bothered by a noisy dog. His eyes, however, missed nothing. He noted the phone in the waitress's hand, the tourist with the camera across the street, and the unyielding posture of the stranger. "All right, folks, let's just calm it all down," the sheriff said, his voice a folksy drawl meant to soothe and take control. He directed a familiar nod at Cade. "Cade, you've been drinking this early." Cade Jennings, who had been momentarily paralyzed by Shadow's presence, seemed to find his footing at the arrival of an ally. "Sheriff, this ain't nothing. Just a little misunderstanding. This lady, I saw what happened," Owen cut in, his voice quiet, but sharp enough to slice through the sheriff's feigned calm. He didn't look at the sheriff, keeping his focus entirely on Cade. Sheriff Kent finally turned his gaze on Owen. "And who might you be, son?" "He's my son," Era said, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. "Owen Wilson," Owen supplied, still not breaking his stare. "Well, Mr. Wilson," the sheriff said, stepping between Owen and Cade. A subtle move to break the line of confrontation. "In Aspen Ridge, we handle our own disagreements. No need for things to get out of hand. Why don't you take your mother on home, and we'll call it a day?" It was a dismissal, a clear attempt to sweep the assault under the rug. Owen recognized it instantly. He had seen this same tactic in corrupt local jurisdictions all over the world. "This disagreement was a criminal assault," Owen stated flatly. "And I expect a formal report to be filed." The sheriff's folksy mask tightened. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Now listen here, son. I'm the law in this town, and I say what's what." It was a heated moment. No real harm done. Owen finally turned his head, his piercing blue eyes meeting the sheriff's for the first time. The sheriff felt an unexpected jolt, as if he were being assessed and found wanting by a predator. "My mother was knocked to the floor," Owen said, each word precise and cold. "There are at least a dozen witnesses, and that man," he nodded toward Cade, "is going to be arrested, or this will become a very different kind of problem." He gave the leash a gentle tug. "Shadow, heel." The German shepherd immediately broke his watch, backing up to sit perfectly at Owen's side, though his eyes remained locked on Cade. Owen put a steadying arm around his mother's shoulders. "Let's go, Mom." He guided her toward the door, moving with a purpose that no one dared to challenge. As they passed the counter, he made brief eye contact with Chloe, giving her a single, almost imperceptible nod of gratitude. Asterisk. From a booth in the back of the diner, another man watched the scene unfold. Sheriff Brody Kent, a man in his late 50s with a face weathered by sun and cynicism, slowly lowered his coffee cup. He wore his uniform with a lazy, comfortable authority, the silver star on his chest polished, but his demeanor suggesting he hadn't had to do any real police work in years. He'd been watching Cade's performance with a look of bored amusement. Cade was a useful tool, and the old woman had been a nuisance, but this was new. The arrival of this quiet, dangerous-looking man and his military-grade dog was an unplanned complication. The sheriff sighed. It seemed he would have to get involved after all. Not to arrest Cade, of course not, but to manage the situation. To contain the fallout, he slowly pushed himself out of his booth, adjusting the gun belt on his hips, and began to walk toward the center of the diner, his face a mask of practiced official concern. Sheriff Brody Kent ambled forward, his posture a study in practiced nonchalance. He approached the tense standoff, not with urgency, but with the weary air of a man bothered by a noisy dog. His eyes, however, missed nothing. He noted the phone in the waitress's hand, the tourist with the camera across the street, and the unyielding posture of the stranger. "All right, folks, let's just calm it all down," the sheriff said, his voice a folksy drawl meant to soothe and take control. He directed a familiar nod at Cade. "Cade, you've been drinking this early." Cade Jennings, who had been momentarily paralyzed by Shadow's presence, seemed to find his footing at the arrival of an ally. "Sheriff, this ain't nothing. Just a little misunderstanding. This lady, I saw what happened," Owen cut in, his voice quiet, but sharp enough to slice through the sheriff's feigned calm. He didn't look at the sheriff, keeping his focus entirely on Cade. Sheriff Kent finally turned his gaze on Owen. "And who might you be, son?" "He's my son," Era said, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. "Owen Wilson," Owen supplied, still not breaking his stare. "Well, Mr. Wilson," the sheriff said, stepping between Owen and Cade. A subtle move to break the line of confrontation. "In Aspen Ridge, we handle our own disagreements. No need for things to get out of hand. Why don't you take your mother on home, and we'll call it a day?" It was a dismissal, a clear attempt to sweep the assault under the rug. Owen recognized it instantly. He had seen this same tactic in corrupt local jurisdictions all over the world. This disagreement was a criminal assault, Owen stated flatly. And I expect a formal report to be filed. The sheriff's spokesy mask tightened. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. Now listen here, son. I'm the law in this town, and I say what's what. It was a heated moment. No real harm done. Owen finally turned his head, his piercing blue eyes meeting the sheriff's for the first time. The sheriff felt an unexpected jolt, as if he were being assessed and found wanting by a predator. My mother was knocked to the floor, Owen said, each word precise and cold. There are at least a dozen witnesses, and that man, he nodded toward Cade, is going to be arrested, or this will become a very different kind of problem. He gave the leash a gentle tug. Shadow, heel. The German shepherd immediately broke his watch, backing up to sit perfectly at Owen's side, though his eyes remained locked on Cade. Owen put a steadying arm around his mother's shoulders. Let's go, Mom. He guided her toward the door, moving with a purpose that no one dared to challenge. As they passed the counter, he made brief eye contact with Chloe, giving her a single, almost imperceptible nod of gratitude. Asterisk. Once outside in the crisp mountain air, Owen settled his mother into the passenger seat of his rugged Ford F-150. He checked her cheek again, the red mark already beginning to darken. A cold, controlled fury simmered just beneath his calm exterior. He walked around to the driver's side and, before starting the engine, pulled out his phone. It wasn't a standard smartphone. It was a rugged, encrypted device. He scrolled through a short list of contacts and pressed a name. The call was answered on the first ring. Gopher Wilson, a gruff voice on the other end said. This is Owen Wilson, he began, his voice devoid of all emotion, a stark contrast to the gentle tone he used with his mother. I'm reporting a targeted physical assault on a military dependent. My mother, Era Wilson. The incident occurred in Aspen Ridge, Colorado. The assailant has been identified. Local law enforcement is on scene and appears to be compromised. I am requesting immediate NCIS liaison and a formal case file to be opened. He listened for a moment. Affirmative. I have secured the dependent. We are proceeding to a safe location. I have multiple civilian video recordings of the incident. Will forward when secure. He ended the call. Meanwhile, across the street, Liam Webb was experiencing a vlogger's nirvana. His hands were shaking with adrenaline. He knew with absolute certainty that he had just captured the video of a lifetime. He didn't hesitate. He packed up his gear, rushed back to his rented cabin, and immediately began uploading the raw, unedited footage to his channel. He agonized over the title for a few moments before settling on pure, uncut viral dynamite. Bully savagely attacks elderly woman confronted by Navy SEAL and K-9 protector. He hit publish. The effect was instantaneous. Within the first hour, the video had 100,000 views. By the third hour, it had crossed the million mark. The internet's outrage was a tidal wave. The comment section was a torrent of fury and support. That old man is a coward. Find him. Did you see that dog? That's a trained military K-9. Good boy. Who is that hero? Someone get him a medal. The video was shared by every major veteran support group on social media. It was picked up by news aggregators, then by cable news outlets. The ripple effect had become a tsunami. In a sleek glass-walled office in Denver, Sterling Croft, a man in his late 40s with slicked back hair and a suit that cost more than most cars, slammed his fist on his mahogany desk. Sterling was the architect of the Aspen Preserve Project, a man who saw landscapes not as places of beauty, but as assets on a balance sheet. He was watching Liam's video on his computer, his handsome face contorted in a snarl of fury. Idiot, he hissed, grabbing his phone. He dialed a number. Get me Thorne now. A few miles away, Mayor Garrison Thorne, a man in his early 60s whose polished grandfatherly image concealed a core of pure greed, was in a meeting about town beautification. His phone buzzed with an urgent text. He excused himself, stepping into his private office and answering the call. Sterling, this had better be important. Your man Jennings is a liability. Croft spat, his voice tight with rage. He's all over the internet assaulting some old woman, and not just any old woman. Apparently, her son is some kind of special forces commando. Mayor Thorne felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He quickly pulled up the video on his own computer. He watched the slap, the fall, and the arrival of the quiet, dangerous man and his dog. He heard Cade's voice loudly referencing the real estate deal. "This is a disaster." Thorne breathed. "You need to fix this, Garrison." Sterlingcroft's voice was like ice. "You and your pet, Sheriff. Bury it. Discredit the video. Pay off the woman. I don't care what you do, but if this mess jeopardizes the final land acquisition, the investors are going to want to know who to hold responsible. And I will give them your name." The line went dead. Back in Aspen Ridge, online sleuths were already at work. Using facial recognition and cross-referencing local business directories, they had a name in under an hour. Cade Jennings, owner of Jennings Construction. Within another hour, they had connected him to his primary client, Sterlingcroft and the Aspen Preserve LLC, and from there, it was a short leap to his most prominent political supporter, Mayor Garrison Thorne, who had personally championed the zoning changes for Croft's project. The names Cade Jennings, Sterlingcroft, and Mayor Garrison Thorne began trending on Twitter right alongside #JusticeForEra. The ripple had reached the shore, and it was about to crash down on them all. The meeting took place in the back room of a high-end hunting lodge, a place smelling of old leather, cedarwood, and unspoken agreements. This was Mayor Garrison Thorne's unofficial office, a sanctuary of power far from the public eye of City Hall. Sterlingcroft was already there, pacing in front of a massive stone fireplace where a low fire crackled. He had driven up from Denver himself, his tailored suit looking absurdly out of place against the rustic backdrop. Sheriff Brody Kent leaned against a wall, cleaning his fingernails with a pocket knife. The picture of bored indifference. Mayor Thorne entered and closed the heavy oak door behind him, shutting out the world. "The problem is contained," he announced, though his voice lacked conviction. Sterlingcroft spun around. "Contained. Garrison, your problem has its own hashtag and is the #1 trending video in the country. My investors are calling. They're seeing headlines linking my company to a violent assault. Contained is not the word I would use. Cade is a fool," the mayor conceded, pouring himself a generous measure of bourbon from a crystal decanter. "But he's our fool. Brody has already had a word with him. He'll keep his mouth shut." The sheriff grunted his assent without looking up. "It's not about Cade keeping his mouth shut," Croft snapped, his voice sharp and loud. "It's about the woman's son, Owen Wilson. My people have been digging. The man is a ghost. No social media, no public records beyond basic military service. But he's not just a soldier, Garrison. He's a Navy SEAL, active duty. Do you have any idea what that means? It means he's a professional problem solver. And we," he gestured around the room, "are now his problem." This was the core of their conspiracy laid bare in the firelight. For 2 years, the three men had run Aspen Ridge like their own private fiefdom. Their plan was simple and brutally effective. Sterlingcroft, with his deep-pocketed and morally flexible investors, identified prime real estate, especially the undeveloped land around Lake Serenity. Mayor Thorne would then use his political influence to rezone the areas, create bureaucratic roadblocks for existing owners, and approve Croft's projects with suspicious speed. Their final and most crucial component was enforcement. That's where Sheriff Kent and men like Cade Jennings came in. When a homeowner refused a lowball offer, the harassment would begin. Sheriff Kent's deputies would suddenly start issuing tickets for minor code violations. Permit applications for simple home repairs would get lost in a sea of red tape. Then Cade Jennings and his crew would escalate things. Accidental property damage, late-night noise, verbal intimidation. Most people, especially retirees or vacation homeowners, would eventually break. They would sell cheap just to escape the nightmare. The plan had been flawless. They had already acquired 70% of the lakeshore. Era Wilson's property was the final critical piece. It was the largest parcel with the best view, the key to unlocking the entire multi-million Aspen Preserve luxury resort. Her stubborn refusal to sell, inspired by her son's wish for her to have a peaceful retreat, was costing them millions in potential profits. The attack was supposed to be the final terrifying push. It was supposed to show her she wasn't safe, that her peaceful retirement would be anything but. "The son is just one man," Sheriff Kent finally said, closing his knife with a snap. "He's on vacation. He'll make some noise, file a complaint, and then he'll have to go back to whatever hole he crawled out of. In the meantime, I'll handle things here." "How, Brody?" the mayor asked, a note of desperation in his voice. "The FBI might get involved. NCIS, for God's sake. Let them come," the sheriff said with a lazy smile. They'll find a simple assault case. Cade will get a slap on the wrist. I'll make sure the report is airtight. Just a local dispute that got out of hand. Nothing connecting it to anything bigger. As for the son, we'll just keep an eye on him. Make sure he understands he's a guest here, and that guests can be made to feel very unwelcome. Owen Wilson knew he was being watched. He had driven his mother back to the secluded lake house, a beautiful modern cabin made of dark wood and vast panes of glass that looked out over the still, clear water of Lake Serenity. He had settled her into a comfortable armchair with a warm cup of tea and a blanket, but his mind was already in mission mode. His vacation was over. As he stood at the large window, seemingly admiring the view, his eyes were actually scanning the tree line across the road. He had noticed it on the drive-in, a dark blue sedan parked in a dirt turnout a quarter-mile down the road. It had no reason to be there. It wasn't a fisherman's truck or a hiker's car. It was an observer's post. Shadow, perimeter, he said quietly. The German shepherd, who had been lying faithfully at Era's feet, rose without a sound. He trotted to the back door, and Owen let him out. Owen watched as the dog moved, not like a pet, but like a soldier, using the cover of the dense woods to sweep the property line in a wide, silent circle. Owen went to his duffel bag. From it, he pulled not clothes, but a series of small, discreet devices. He moved through the house with practiced efficiency, placing tiny wireless motion sensors at key entry points, doors, windows, and the long, dark driveway. He activated a small portable jammer that would disrupt any simple listening devices that might be planted nearby. Finally, he took out a small thermal monocular and scanned the woods again. He caught a fleeting heat signature from the blue sedan. 2 occupants. His peaceful vacation retreat had just become a forward operating base. He sat down across from his mother, his demeanor calm and reassuring. "Mom, I need you to stay inside for a while. Keep the doors locked. Don't answer for anyone but me." Era looked at her son. She saw the quiet intensity in his eyes, the subtle shift in his posture. She had seen it before in the rare moments between his deployments when the weight of his hidden world would briefly surface. She didn't know the details of his work, only that it was dangerous and important. She knew he was a protector. "Owen, what's happening?" she asked, her voice steady. "The men who sent that man to the diner," he said, "they're not going to stop. The video going public has made them desperate. They're going to try to intimidate us into silence." He leaned forward. "But they've made a critical mistake. They think they're dealing with a scared old woman and her vacationing son. They don't know who we are. They don't know that we don't intimidate." He gave her a small, confident smile. A smile that said, "I have this under control. They wanted a war over this piece of land," he said, his voice dropping to a low, determined whisper. "They're about to get one." The viral video was a fire, and Mayor Garrison Thorne's first instinct was to stamp it out with brute force. His strategy, concocted with Sheriff Kent in the smoky backroom of the lodge, was twofold: discredit the source and silence the witnesses. The first target was Chloe Vance. She was in the middle of her afternoon shift, the diner still buzzing with gossip about the morning's events, when her manager, a perpetually nervous man named Howard, called her into his tiny, cluttered office. Howard was a man who lived in fear. Fear of bad reviews, fear of the health inspector, and most of all, fear of upsetting powerful people like the mayor. "Chloe," he began, avoiding her eyes and shuffling papers on his desk. "Corporate got wind of the incident this morning, and the video you took. I was documenting a crime." "Howard," Chloe said, her arms crossed. She knew what was coming. "Be that as it may," he mumbled, "you violated company policy. Our social media guidelines are very clear. You can't post videos of the establishment or its patrons without authorization. I didn't post it. I sent it to the police as evidence and to a local news outlet," she said, a small bluff to see his reaction. "Isn't that what a good citizen is supposed to do?" Howard finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "Please, Chloe, don't make this harder than it has to be. My hands are tied." The mayor's office called directly. "They suggested that your continued employment here reflects poorly on the diner's reputation." He swallowed hard. "I have to let you go. Your final check is here." Chloe took the envelope without a word. She wasn't surprised, just angry. This was how power worked in Aspen Ridge: a quiet phone call, a veiled threat, and a good person was out of a job. She looked at Howard, a man she'd known for years, and saw not a boss, but a coward. You know what you're doing is wrong." "Howard," she said quietly. "It's just business," he whispered, turning back to his paperwork. Unable to face her, the second target was Liam Webb. Liam was on a creative high. His video was exploding. His subscriber count was skyrocketing, and his phone was ringing off the hook with calls from national news producers. He spent the afternoon doing phone interviews, feeling like a real investigative journalist. As evening fell, he drove back to his small rented cabin on the outskirts of town, whistling, dreaming of the career-making opportunities this story would bring. The first thing he noticed was the front door. It was slightly ajar, the wood around the lock splintered and broken. A cold dread washed over him, extinguishing his earlier excitement. He pushed the door open. The cabin was a mess, but not from a simple robbery. His clothes were thrown about, his suitcase overturned. But the thieves had only been interested in one thing. On the floor in the center of the small living room lay the shattered remains of his MacBook Pro. The screen was spiderwebbed with cracks. The keyboard smashed in. His hard drives had been pulled from his desk and stomped on, their plastic casings crushed. It wasn't theft. It was a message. It was a complete and utter annihilation of his work. He sank to his knees, his hands shaking. Everything was on that laptop: the original video file, his backups, all of his vlogging work from the past year. He felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't some random break-in. This was professional. This was a warning delivered with brutal efficiency by someone who wanted to make sure he understood the stakes. He thought of Sheriff Kent's lazy smile in the diner. This had his fingerprints all over it. Part 10. In a sprawling, tastefully decorated home on the wealthiest hill in Aspen Ridge, Evelyn Thorne watched the evening news. Evelyn was the mayor's wife, a woman of quiet elegance and refined beauty. In her youth, she had been vibrant and idealistic. But 25 years of marriage to Garrison Thorne had slowly eroded her spirit, replacing it with a carefully maintained facade of serene composure. She had long known about her husband's corrupt dealings, turning a blind eye for the sake of peace, for the life he provided. But lately, the compromises had begun to taste like poison. She watched the news report, which featured a short, grainy clip from Liam's video. She saw the raw violence in Kate Jennings's face. She saw Ara Wilson, a woman her own age, falling to the floor. And in that moment, something inside her broke. This wasn't about zoning laws or backroom deals anymore. This was about cruelty. It was about the ugly, rotten core of the man she had married. Just then, her husband walked into the room, loosening his tie. "Ridiculous, isn't it?" he said, gesturing to the television. "The whole country in an uproar over a barroom spat. I've already taken care of it. The girl at the diner is gone, and the tourist videographer has been discouraged." He said it with such casual arrogance, such a complete lack of remorse that Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. He wasn't just corrupt, he was a monster who felt nothing. She waited. She waited until he was in the shower, the sound of the water masking any noise she might make. Then, with her heart pounding in her chest, she walked into his private study. It was his sanctuary, a room of dark wood, leather-bound books, and secrets. Behind a large oil painting of a mountain landscape was a wall safe. She knew the combination. She had watched him open it 100 times. Her fingers, cold and trembling, turned the dial. Right 22, left 58, right 11. The safe clicked open. Inside was his insurance policy. There were several leather-bound ledgers filled with his meticulous handwriting detailing every bribe paid, every kickback received. There was a small digital audio recorder containing recordings of his most incriminating meetings with Croft and Kent, and there was a single black USB drive labeled contingency, with shaking hands. She took it all. She carried it to her own small office at the other end of the house. She had her own laptop, her own secrets. She plugged in the USB drive and began to copy its contents onto a duplicate drive she kept hidden in a jewelry box. File after file transferred over spreadsheets, scanned documents, copies of offshore bank statements. She then used a small device to duplicate the audio from the recorder. Just as the last file finished copying, she heard the shower turn off. Panic seized her. She quickly ejected the drives, put her husband's originals back in the safe, and spun the dial. She had just hung the painting back in place when he walked into the study, a towel wrapped around his waist. "Evelyn, what are you doing in here?" he asked, a hint of suspicion in his voice. She turned, forcing a calm she did not feel. "Just looking for a book, dear," she said, pulling a random volume from the shelf. I couldn't sleep. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes narrowed. Then he seemed to relax. Well, don't worry your pretty head about all this business. It will all be over by tomorrow. As he walked out, Evelyn leaned against the bookshelf, her legs weak with relief. He was wrong. It wasn't over. For him, it was just beginning. Clutched in her hand, hidden in the folds of her robe, was a small USB drive containing enough evidence to burn his entire world to the ground. The phone call came in the late afternoon. Era was sitting by the large window overlooking the lake, a book open in her lap, though she hadn't turned a page in an hour. The house, which Owen had turned into a fortress of quiet surveillance, felt both safe and confining. The caller ID was blocked. She let it ring 3 times before answering, her voice cautious. "Hello, Mrs. Wilson." The voice on the other end was female, cultured, and strained, as if holding back a torrent of emotion. "My name is Evelyn Thorne. I am the mayor's wife." Era's grip tightened on the phone. She glanced toward the kitchen, where Owen was methodically cleaning a piece of equipment. His movements precise and silent. "Yes, I know this is a terribly forward request," Evelyn continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "but I was hoping you might be able to meet me. I feel I owe you a personal apology for what happened at the diner. For the inhospitable welcome you've received in our town, it was a plausible excuse." But Era's instincts told her this was about something far more significant than an apology. "I'm not sure that's a good idea. Mrs. Thorne, please." Evelyn's voice cracked slightly. "There is an old chapel, St. Jude's, on the edge of town. It's always quiet in 1 hour. I wouldn't ask if it weren't a matter of the utmost importance." Era paused, her mind racing. A public apology from the mayor's wife would be a powerful statement, but the secrecy, the urgency, this felt different. It felt dangerous.